This is a photo of D'Angelo Martin. And he is doing a very long time in Michigan State Prison for being a serial rapist and red rummer. So he just got sentenced in 2022. His earliest parole date is 2064. What does this have? What does he have to do with Butch Jones? Well, so Butch Jones is out. He's been released. He's in Detroit, at a halfway house or something. Any glamorization of Young Boys Incorporated, this should end that, because there's really nothing to glamorize. I've interviewed many people associated with it. A lot of dark events around it. Not for everybody, but certainly with Mr. Jones. Now, what does this serial killer have to do with it? Well, D'Angelo Martin's mother, I'm looking at her state of Michigan Court of Appeals right now, Shantrinas Cascello Barker. Here's her picture. She's doing life in prison. In 1998, one of the crimes Butch Jones was convicted of in 2000 or whatever was the kidnapping and attempted extortion of Antoine Carruthers. This guy's mother, this woman, in 1998, let me read this here.
Stunning developments tonight in the case of suspected serial killer D'Angelo Martin. Multiple sources say he's also linked to the case of a woman found strangled in February last year.
7 Action News reporter Kimberly Craig joins us live with the surprising information about Martin's own mother. Kim?
That's correct, Alan. In 1999, D'Angelo Martin's mother was convicted of a number of crimes, including kidnapping and murder. And recently, relatives told her that police suspect her son is a serial killer. And this was her reaction.
Of course she's stunned. I mean, that's her son. You know, that's her baby. I know she's shocked about all of it.
This is the mother of 34-year-old D'Angelo Martin. She's 52-year-old Shantrinas Barker. And when D'Angelo Martin was just 14 years old, Barker was sentenced to life in prison for murder. Now her son is suspected of the same. Detroit police have identified D'Angelo Martin as a suspected serial killer. His alleged victims include 52-year-old Nancy Harrison.
In the fall of 1998, Jones arranged for Coffee, Jackson, Henderson, Davis, and another individual to kidnap Jones's rival drug dealer, Antoine Carruthers, because people, quote, would pay a lot for Carruthers' return. Jones's crew kidnapped Carruthers, handcuffing him, placing him in a van, stealing his money and jewelry. They took Carruthers to a home where they tied him up in a basement, guarded Carruthers with a bayonet with an attached an AK-47. When Carruthers refused to give up the contact info of his criminal associate, Henderson, Carruthers with the bayonet, Carruthers was allowed to call his girlfriend. He told her that Jones's crew was going to kill him if she did not get the money. The girlfriend relayed this info to Carruthers' mother, who in turn contacted the Detroit police. Jones demanded $100,000 as a ransom for Carruthers, and negotiations for a drop-off point took place. Jackson banged Carruthers as negotiations for the ransom stalled. When Henderson told Jones they were not going to be able to get the ransom money for Carruthers, Jones instructed Henderson, "You know what you got to do." Jones's crew dragged Carruthers into a car where they 3 times in the face. Jones entered a plea agreement and stipulated that from 95 to 01, he and his criminal associates distributed controlled substances involving more than 5 kilos of cocaine. First Step Act, blah, blah, blah. So we're going to get back to that. So the woman in the case, this woman, that was her house, was where Antoine Carruthers, Butch Jones's victim, was held during this torture. And her son grew up to be this serial killer. So this has been one of my themes when I do these stories. Like, what is the point of me talking about this stuff? Understand, if you think you're going into the street to make money, or you're going to sell drugs, make money, a lot of people are not. Like, they say they're there for money, but they do all these other things that don't really have anything to do with money, like the extreme violence. So on May 12th, 2008, Judge John Corbett O'Meara sentenced Milton Butch Jones to 360 months of imprisonment. His sentence runs to June 2031. His anticipated release date is January 20th, 2027. So he got out. He's at the halfway house like 18 months early or whatever. They denied his motion for compassionate release for having COVID-19. They didn't want to. Court denies Jones's motion. They didn't let him out early. Jones has a lengthy. Now listen, Butch. If you think of Butch Jones as someone associated with getting money, he probably did briefly, Courtney Brown's friend that I've done the stories on, Mr. Holloway, has been in prison since 1985 for supposedly being called to Butch Jones's home, whereas after Butch was in prison, his wife caught somebody trying to break in supposedly to steal the $5 million that Butch Jones had accumulated. Now, Butch Jones, he was just one wing of YBI, but if you're even pulling in, if you're pocketing, they had all these spots doing $20,000, $40,000 a day. Now, there's a lot of people getting paid, and you had to buy the stuff and all that. But if Butch had a run for 18 months, you just put $10,000 a day away. 10,000, not all this 100,000 a day. If Butch Jones pocketed himself $10,000 a day every day for 18 months, that's $5 million. So I could certainly believe he could have had $5 million. I don't know. So Jones, they denied his compassionate release to get out during the COVID thing. Mind you, he had already done 20. I think he got locked up in 2000, and he was in the county fighting it because they were trying to give him a death penalty and all of that. He fought that case for years, I guess. Was he locked up for 8 years fighting that case? Wow. In 1973, Jones stabbed a man named Timothy Hinton, convicted for manslaughter. He talks about this in his doc. And Butch Jones, I'll give him this. He was that movie star criminal thing that some people have. That was him. Because I don't know how much of a skillful, he was a skillful enough gangster, but it was more so his personality. He talked people into doing stuff for him. And he put out that book. When he put that YBI book out, and this is for Detroit people, I guess if you're not from Detroit, you won't be familiar, but in 96 or 7, when Butch Jones put out a book, this is long before anyone was doing DVDs. That Alpo Game Over thing, Alpo and Rich Porter, that documentary came out in maybe 05 or something, and then I put out Rolling and all my stuff in like 08, 09. Troy was ahead of me a couple of years in New York, but that's still with the Street Star stuff. That was 03 or 4, I think, or 2 or 02 or something. So Butch Jones was way ahead of that. He knew that these black gangster stories were fascinating and was a big deal, and it was a wide, now that's all anyone talks about. Butch Jones was way ahead. But the problem was Butch Jones was still involved with crime when he put that book out in here, and he even submitted for an interview. This is America's Black Journal, Detroit's Black Journal. So this is a TV show. This is Butch Jones being interviewed in the late 90s or mid 90s.
Every day, the police was trying to bust me. So if I knew they was gonna come on Monterey today, even if they was on Monterey, I say when they come, y'all set up on Dwayne. While they over here, I would be on another street, slanging, while we watching them.
So in the cat and mouse game, you were winning at this time.
Yes.
And that was as much a rush as anything else.
Oh man, you couldn't get no higher than that. Not only was I beating them, I'm getting money, and I'm saying, and I'm showing them, y'all can't catch me.
Although the Detroit police worked overtime to stop Young Boys Incorporated, Jones continued to elude local authorities. It took cooperation between the Detroit Police Department and federal agencies, primarily the DEA, to stop Jones.
on the 24-hour arrest reports, you would see the same adults and juvenile names over and over again, and you started to see a pattern there. So what it took was a collaborative effort from our department, our narcotics division and DEA, and we sat down and said, hey, look, there's more to this case than what this organization than what we really thought.
How do you put together a drug enterprise with that level of organization and kind of innovation? You are the man who basically wrote the modern textbook on urban drug running. Really? Aren't you?
Well, my input, my attributes to the organization was that I knew how things go. You know, I knew the rules, you know, and they was looking for direction. They needed somebody to tell them the rules. And the rules was, you know, if you're gonna slang, you can't do no telling. It's part of the police job to stop, rash you, pick you up, bust you if they can. You see what I'm saying? It's nothing personal with them. They doing what the taxpayers is paying them to do. You know, we were really fighting several different fronts, so you know, that something had to break. So, and we could not have done it without the effort with the feds, because they had the extra tools to help us. Young boys became so sophisticated that we did have to rely upon not just information and search warrants. We did have to rely on federal wiretaps in order to break them.
In December 1982, Jones and 40 other alleged upper and middle-level YBI employees were indicted by a federal grand jury. Jones escaped arrest until March 22, 1983, when he turned himself into federal authorities.
But mind you, this guy was still messing around according to what he pled guilty to. So he's convicted of manslaughter in 73, gets out, paroled in 78, violated his parole 4 times, went back into custody in 79, in 1980 absconded from supervision. Now, I have a lot of Butch Jones stories that people that were in YBI told me. I'm not going to get into those. If people want to tell them, I'm not really here to tell Butch Jones stories. It's just, you know, the streets are very dangerous. Butch Jones was a dangerous part. Like all this YBI stuff was a very dangerous thing to be a part of, and the streets are in general. Selling drugs in a, you know. In the 80s, Jones was leader of notorious heroin trafficking ring, Young Boys Incorporated. So he's in and out of parole 79 to 83. By 83, he gets convicted. So he had a 3-year run. Like I said, he could have definitely stacked a couple $1 million. And there's a lot to talk about in this. I'm just going through his what he did, for those who didn't know what he did to get locked back up. So Butch Jones total committed to criminality and gangsterism, because he gets the YBI indictment comes in 83. He gets 12 years, which is, he was lucky. YBI was before the sentencing laws got changed, you know, where everybody got slammed starting after 86 or something. While in custody, so while he's in federal prison, there was a second YBI indictment, which was him running stuff from prison. And then he also got a conspiracy to possess with intent to distribute heroin, and conspiracy to defraud the United States. So he got 6 years in Texas state prison because it happened in Texas, but they just ran it concurrent with his federal sentence. So that meant nothing. In 88, so there was a third YBI indictment in 88, and then he was charged with first-degree murder and accessory after the fact to some murders back in the early 80s, including that of wonderful Wayne Davis. But he was found not guilty of the murder charges. He was only found guilty of an accessory after the fact. He got 40 to 60 months. So that's why he left the Fed. So he got sent to the feds in 83. He gets another drug case in the feds. So he gets sentenced in 87. And then in 88, they charge him with these murders in the state of Michigan. And but he only gets convicted of accessory after the fact. He gets basically a 4 years, 3.5 to 5 or something for that. Released from custody in 92 from the state of Michigan. So he did a couple years in the state of Michigan, and then he completed his parole in 94. Meanwhile, people like Kurt McGirt was locked up this whole time. But that's another story. For those of you not from Detroit or don't know the YBI story, there's too much. I can't like give you a guide to it. If you're interested in who Butch Jones is, watch videos on my channel or other people's videos or read about it. But this is just about what he did after the YBI. The facts underlying the offense for which Jones is presently incarcerated, he's technically still incarcerated. He's an inmate because he's at a halfway house. Started in 1995. So this is what he admitted to when he made his plea agreement. So while he was promoting his book and while he was being interviewed, around that time he was doing this, selling cocaine, marijuana, and heroin from an abandoned building in Detroit, Michigan. So I think he set back up on Monterey. There were supposedly 2 houses called the Dog Pound. And that's when that weed started getting really popular. If those old enough, like as the 90s, as the mid-90s, I think as less people smoking crack, the weed got more popular, and nobody made money like the weed guys in the early 2000s. But so he was doing extortion. Jones employed several dope fiends to sell packets of heroin on a street corner in Detroit. Employed an individual named Walter Jackson to oversee the street operation. One of Jones's primary sources of narcotics was his criminal associate, Raymond Canty. Yeah, so Raymond Canty was his partner in the book. And their photos are, so these guys end up, they were still doing stuff. One of Jones's primary sources of narcotics was his criminal associate, Raymond Canty. So he's listed. Butch Jones and Raymond Canty did the YBI book together. In 1998, Jones and Canty discussed the possibility of ripping off customers of Canty's cocaine supplier. So this is how shady everything is. Butch and them have some guys rob, Canty had a cocaine supplier. They have some guys rob some other customer that had the same supplier. They got 5 bricks, but they told Butch and Canty they only got 3. They kept 2. Jones then had his cousin shoot one of them. Davis was not killed by the shooting, but he was injured. So they're robbing people. The robbers are robbing them. Then they're shooting people. And then 1998, Jones, Jackson, and an individual named Jason Henderson and a few others went to rob another drug dealer. Armed with weapons, they went to the drug dealer's home, but no one was there. As they drove away from the home, Jones saw at a gas station some individuals whom he believed had wronged him in the past. Jones and his crew pulled into the gas station, drew their guns on the individuals, made them lie on the ground, took their jewelry and their cars. So Butch Jones was a dangerous guy. More so seemed like than a drug dealer, like an extortionist and someone who could get you killed. In 1998, Jones decided to open another drug house. The man who lived next door to this house, Mark Grace, did not like the idea of Jones operating a drug operation there, as Grace was purportedly also selling drugs. Jones asked Henderson to kill Grace, which he ended up doing, and he got paid $5,000. That's one homicide he pled to. Jones' violence did not end there, and then now we get to the serial killer I referenced. Upon learning that the girlfriend of another large-scale drug dealer kept hundreds of thousands in drug proceeds in her home, Jones orchestrated several unsuccessful attempts for individuals in his crew to rob the woman. Jones then decided to kidnap the woman. This plan was thwarted. So in the fall of 98, they grabbed Antoine Carruthers outside of a record store, some record store in Detroit. Not sure which one. They're all closed now, pretty much. And again, so they tortured him in this house. I don't know if that D'Angelo Martin, he was it was his mother's house. He was probably there. And he grew up to be a serial killer. So you see that. Ultimately, Jones's distribution of drugs, so they killed Antoine Carruthers. Ultimately, Jones's distribution of drugs and his roles in the killing of Grayson Carruthers led to the charges in this case. Jones entered a plea agreement and stipulated that from 95 to 01, he and his criminal associates distributed controlled substances involving more than 5 kilos. He also stipulated that his criminal enterprise's activities included killing Grayson Carruthers. At his plea hearing, Jones admitted that his co-conspirators' killing of Grayson Carruthers was reasonably foreseeable to him. Jones was held accountable for his actions, receiving 360 months. And they didn't let him out early. So Mr. Jones is around in Detroit. He's in his 70s. I don't know what his health is, what his plans are. He seemed like I think he did a little interview, but he's been laying kind of low. The Detroit that he left, even back in, he pled guilty in 08, but he was locked up from 01. They were trying to give him a death penalty. It took him years to even work and get that. Let me not say work. I don't know that. I don't mean that he was giving information he may have or didn't. I have no idea. But I mean, him and his lawyer had to work to get a plea agreement of 360 months so he could even one day get out, which he did. I give it to him. He pled guilty to 2 murder, one with a torture murder and another, all this crazy stuff. And he was trying to get out after only 22 years. Simply put, a prison sentence of 22 years is insufficient to recognize the full seriousness of Jones's offense. So they didn't let him out. So he fought for from 01 to 08 to get his 360-month plea agreement. And but when he left Detroit in 2000, Detroit still had almost 1 million people. Now it's more like probably 650. It's lost a third of its people. The economy is probably half of what it was. Yes, down a little part of downtown Detroit has been built up more than it was, but there was already stuff downtown. It was just black. Now it's not, some of it's not. So is Detroit more than it was in 2000? No, it's much less. I was in Detroit then, and I've been in Detroit now. Detroit is much less than it was when he left. So he's gotten out. It's even more burned out, other than around the Cass Corridor, which they now call Midtown, and the little couple blocks downtown that's nice off Library Street and all that. But I just thought that was interesting for those of you that know about the YBI and all that. There's so much to talk about. I'm not going to go into it, and I've done many stories on it. But maybe he's working on a big interview with somebody. I don't know. For those of you that's interested in him, I think he has an interview on YouTube. Pretty frightening when you read all this stuff at once. I tell you, I always sold weed to a degree, but not that much. I know all these rappers make selling drugs sound easy. Maybe it is now. But I know back when I was a kid, when I was young, it never felt safe or cool having we're selling crack, nothing's going to happen. It always seemed dangerous. And I grew up and lived not too far from where he was in Dexter. I was in Highland Park, and when I was a little kid, I lived on Monterey, the same street. It was his headquarters. We were at Monterey and Woodward in Highland Park, about, a half mile from Monterey and Dexter. But
Butch, we're in Highland Park, Michigan. This was a place that has a particular significance as it relates to your criminal career. What happened here in Highland Park on Richardson Street in Hamilton in that apartment building across the street?
It was back in the summer of '73. I was sitting on my mama's porch. I didn't have really nothing to do, just chilling. And my homeboy, Paul, come and asked me if I had a gun. So I was like, yeah, I had a gun, what's up? And all of a sudden, I don't know if this guy was high or whatever, he just kept doing this karate thing, and I end up shooting the guy in the leg because I don't want to hurt this guy. But at the same token, I don't want him to hurt me or kick the gun out of my hand or something like this. So when I shoot the guy, my man Robert Jr. just come out of the room and just went wild. He just went to stabbing the guy. He just went to stab him. So now, this thing is out of hand now, man.
The guy that you shot in the leg and who subsequently ended up getting stabbed by your partner died.
He died.
And you went to prison because this was now murder.
Right. And what really actually saved me is when the lady who testified up there testified that she told the whole story just like I told it to you, but I kept trying to tell the guy I didn't want to do nothing to him, you know, and that the guy came out and started stabbing him and wanted to kill her and the baby, and I wouldn't let him. And this is how the judge ended up letting me, convicted me of manslaughter.
I always felt unsafe in the streets of Detroit. I mean, back in those days, it didn't feel like, oh, you can just get money and nothing's gonna happen. Like, there's a lot of dangerous people, and it wasn't all glamorous. A lot of gunplay, a lot of robbery, a lot of extortion, and that even goes on now. If you really start making some money and you're doing something illegal where you can't go to the police, you better be strong, because there's people that all they do, they say, why bother selling dope when I can just take money from the people who do? You can't be living in those neighborhoods like the other people I've interviewed, the Davis family and the Courtney Browns and the Eddie Jacksons and all them. They weren't really around. They weren't coming out of record stores in inner city Detroit to where somebody was going to get them. They weren't around. They were, but they weren't. And they weren't by themselves, and they weren't, whatever was going on. So a lot of death and destruction, and even a serial killer. Not to blame him on Butch Jones, of course, but interesting that the mother of the serial killer was part of the kidnapping and she's serving life. Butch Jones is out. She's not. Think about that, because he did a federal 360-month plea. She got convicted. Think about that. That woman is in prison still. Butch is out. Criminal justice system that's why I always listen. I'm not just telling these stories just to gossip or tell stories on YouTube anymore. I mean, or even to give you shock value. Just don't get involved. Like I always say, if you're poor and you got no options, do what you got to do to get a couple $100,000 and get away from where you live. Beyond that, trying to be Big Meech or another YBI or something, it's not. It's dead. And even when it was happening, it was bad. It's not what you think it was. For most of the people, very few people came out of that in good shape. And this is a particularly dark tale, but the YBI tale starts dark with Mark Marshall being accused of killing his own father, stepmother-in-law, and the nurse. Like, it was either 3 or 4 people in 1975, but he had 2 mistrials, and then they didn't try him the 3rd time, and he got a settlement of $80,000. And according to Butch Jones's own book, he says they got a lump sum of money, and they went and saw Milwaukee Jack, and they put him down like 4 flat tires, to quote Butch Jones. But that money came from, I guess, Mark Marshall's father's life insurance. And he was accused, but not convicted, but taken to trial twice. So YBI, born in violence, and a lot of violence ran through it. And that's why a lot of these guys, like, I had different people I've interviewed, but a lot of people were involved with YBI. And you see how few have been interviewed. And even when I interviewed Kurt McGirt, he gave me a great interview, but he was very, you know, I mean, I know at this point, I know so much. I know how to interview the Detroit people without touching on all, because I kind of know a lot of backstory. I know what not to even talk about. But there was so much violence with the YBI. A lot of these guys, they don't want to be on camera associated with it. They don't want to talk about it. The Pony Down people, I did the one thing where it's just their voices, and then they were like, don't put up anymore. I think there's a lot of unsolved mysteries from back then that people don't want reopened, which, you know, I'm sure, I don't blame them. So, but there's a lot of people that were associated with YBI that are around, but they don't want to talk about this stuff on camera, other than a few that do. Speaking of frightening YBI things, there was a Antonio Cromer was a kid that was arrested. He was like just a street corner seller, part of YBI. He went to prison for murder, and people I knew in jail said he was in prison stabbing people. I don't know if that's true, but he got another life sentence. I read his case. Some little guy was selling crack, at a house, very minor. Antonio Cromer, this former YBI killer, is coming over, buying dope, going in the back room, smoking it. And the third time he comes over, like he's probably just coming back, buying a couple dimes, go in the back, get high, leave, normal. The guy is playing cards. He's not even running it like, you know, with no security. The ex-YBI turned a drug addict. The third time he comes back, he kills him and takes his little crack sack. And more than a few of those YBI guys ended up. There's a bunch doing life for different murders during the YBI. They turned into drug addict. So there you go. Welcome home, Butch Jones. I hope you stay out and you enjoy whatever's you got going on, and maybe you'll have a lot of years left. I mean, nowadays people live to be 85 and 90. I don't know what his health really is, but there you go. That's what Butch Jones went in for back then. Was back in 99, he pled guilty to selling some drugs, but extorting, kidnapping, killing people, and per his plea agreement. All I did was read his plea agreement, which is on Pacer Monitor. Well, this is his compassionate release, but it references his plea agreement. There you go. Al Prophet, American Dope.